The key wouldn't turn. Not a little stuck. Like, deadbolt had decided it was done for the day. I jiggled it. Slammed my shoulder into the doorframe. Nothing. The whole house was in his name, remember? Mine was just an accessory. Like the potted fern that was slowly developing. It was shedding leaves at an alarming rate, each one a tiny brown flag of surrender. I'd tried watering it, misting it, even whispering. A lost cause. Much like my current situation. He'd said it. You'll never do this alone, Brooks. Said it over Thanksgiving dinner, the year before. His voice was like dry leaves skittering across concrete. I remember the smell of gravy, thick and cloying, and then his words, like tiny shards of glass in it. The mashed potatoes were lumpy that year, eh? Everything felt wrong. The clink of silverware, the forced laughter, all of it a prelude to those words. I tried the back door. Locked too. Of course. This was his whole plan. A subtle little trap. I could feel my left knee starting to bounce, a hummingbird trapped in my joint. I couldn't make it stop. It was an involuntary tremor, a physical manifestation. You know how it is when you're trying to stay calm and your body just rebels. My knee just started bouncing uncontrollably, like it. This woman was going to be here in an hour. The appraiser. To finalize the paperwork. My paperwork. The one I'd spent months wrestling into existence. The one that proved I could, in fact, do this alone. I'd meticulously gathered every single document, cross-referenced every. It felt like proof I could do this alone, all these papers. And now, it felt off cardboard box about to be blown away by a stiff breeze. I sat on the bottom step, the one that was always a little wobbly. It creaked a sad, drawn-out sigh. My stomach rumbled. I hadn't eaten since that questionable gas station burrito 2 states ago. The thought of that burrito made my throat feel like sandpaper. It had been a culinary gamble that hadn't paid off. Greasy, mushy, and with an aftertaste that lingered like a bad decision. And I'd eaten it in the car, hunched over. Now, the memory of it was a physical ache. Mind you, I'd anticipated this. I had the spare key. Tucked away in my glove compartment. A small victory, a tiny rebellion against the. I reached for it. My fingers brushed against a crumpled receipt from. The one where I'd met him to sign the initial agreement. He'd seemed so sure of himself then, a smug owl perched on a branch. The receipt was for 2 lattes and a ridiculously overpriced pastry. I'd been so hopeful then, so eager to prove him wrong. Foolish me. The spare key was there. Solid. Cold. I pocketed it. I remember the feel of it, a small weight against my thigh. It was a familiar weight, one I hadn't carried in years. It felt off, a reminder of a time when things were simpler, or at least, I'd believed they were. The back door clicked open. Yeah. I won. Anyway. The appraiser arrived. She was efficient. Didn't say much. Just walked through the place, scribbling in her notepad. I watched her from the kitchen, where It smelled vaguely of burnt plastic and regret. The coffee maker made this weird gurgling sound. It was its age and probable neglect. I swear, it sounded like it was weeping. She finished in the living room. The one with the crooked picture frame above the fireplace that I'd never bothered to straighten. And then she paused. Looked at me. Her eyes narrowed, just a fraction. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. The way her gaze lingered on me for a beat longer than necessary. This isn't what we discussed, she said. Her voice was flat. Like a plank. No inflection, no emotion. Just the delivery of a factual statement. I just stared. The coffee maker hissed like an angry snake. It was a sound that usually made me. A soundtrack to impending doom. The documentation, she continued. It states the house is solely in your name. I nodded. slowly, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. My knee was still doing its jitterbug. But it's not. It is, I said. Just that. A single, defiant word. It felt small and insignificant against the weight of the situation. She looked at her papers. Then back at me. A long, considering silence. You know how it is. Those moments when everything just hangs there, suspended, heavy with unspoken accusations. I could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere in the house, each tick an eternity. I could also hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. A sound I usually tuned out, but now it was a booming presence. She closed her notepad. There seems to be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Right. That was a polite way of putting it. A colossal, house-sized misunderstanding. I thought about the other key. The one I'd found tucked inside a dusty book on the bookshelf. A thrill, a little spark of defiance, had shot through me then. I remembered feeling it, like static electricity, and it was a worn copy of some forgotten novel, its pages brittle and yellowed. I'd been searching for something, anything, to distract. That's when I'd seen it, nestled within the spine. A small, tarnished key. It felt off, a hidden weapon. I'll need to speak with the previous owner, she said. You can't, I told her. Her eyebrows lifted. Almost imperceptibly. Why not? He's unavailable. For how long? I shrugged. Indefinitely. It was a word that felt both accurate and deeply satisfying. Indefinitely. A perfectly vague pronouncement of doom for anyone trying to pin him down. She packed up her things. Her movements were precise. No wasted motion. She looked like a perfectly designed machine. Each item placed in her briefcase with an almost surgical care. The rustle of papers, the click of clasps. It was a symphony of efficiency. I'll have to file a preliminary report. That's fine. It was more than fine. It was perfect. A temporary reprieve. She left. The front door clicked shut, leaving me alone. Again. The sound of her car pulling away was a fading drone. The coffee maker gave up its ghost. A weak drip. Then nothing. Just a sad, brown puddle in the glass carafe. A fitting end to my caffeine aspirations. And it was like the machine itself had decided it was done with its existence. A final, pathetic sigh. I walked over to the fireplace. Looked at the crooked frame. It was a picture of him, smiling. A fake, plastered-on smile. I reached out and straightened it. Then I knocked it off the mantel. It hit the floor with a dull thud. The glass shattered. Little shards scattered across the worn rug. Whatever. I need to call the dentist. My tooth has been bothering me for a week. I keep forgetting to make an appointment. It's probably just a cavity, but it could be something worse. I should get that checked out. It's irresponsible not to. The drive home was long. The radio was playing some country song about a lost dog. I turned it off. The silence in the car was a different kind of heavy than the silence in the house. It was a familiar silence, one I'd grown accustomed to. The kind that doesn't demand anything from you. I passed a billboard for a roadside attraction. Just to see it. To break the monotony. But I didn't. It felt like too much effort. When I got to my apartment, I opened the windows, letting in the city sounds. Sirens, car horns, the distant murmur of voices. It was a cacophony, but it was alive. I went into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Nothing appealing. Just a half-eaten jar of pickles and some wilting lettuce. I ate a pickle. It was sour and crunchy. A small, sharp comfort. I sat on the couch, the springs groaning in protest. I scrolled through my phone. News articles, social media updates, emails I didn't want to read. Everything felt distant, irrelevant. My mind kept drifting back to the house. To the key. To his smug face. He thought he had me. He thought he could just erase me. Like I was a smudge on a pristine surface. I remembered another key. A smaller one. It was for the old shed out back. The one. He'd always told me not to go in there. Said it was. I'd never believed him. But the thought of that shed, with its memory of a time when I was curious, when I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I decided to go back. It was late, but I didn't care. I needed to do something. Anything. I grabbed my jacket and the spare key. The night air was cool against my skin. The streetlights cast long shadows. The house loomed in the darkness, a silent, imposing structure. I walked around to the back. The lock on the back door was still stubbornly defiant. I pulled out the spare key, the one I'd pocketed earlier. I slid it into the lock. It fit. A perfect, satisfying click. And the door swung open. The house and silent, carrying the faint scent of dust and disuse. It smelled like a place that had been holding its breath for a long time. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. Each creak and groan of the house sounded amplified in the stillness. I went to the bookshelf. The dusty book was still there. I pulled it out. The smell of old paper and dried lavender was stronger now. I ran my fingers along the spine, feeling the rough texture of the binding. I didn't find another key. Just the lingering scent. I stood in the living room, looking at the fireplace. The crooked picture frame was still lying on the floor, a dark stain on the rug. I picked it up. The glass was sharp. I traced the outline of his smile. It was still fake. Still plastered on. I went back to the kitchen. The coffee maker sat there, a monument to. I looked at the sad, brown puddle in the carafe. It looked like a miniature, stagnant pond. I poured it out. The liquid made a small, wet sound as it hit the sink. I walked back to the front door. The key was still in the lock. I turned it. The deadbolt slid back with a satisfying thud. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The night air was a welcome relief. I looked up at the sky. The stars were out. Tiny, distant lights in the vast darkness. I got in my car. The engine turned over with a rumble. I put it in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look back. The house receded in the rearview mirror, a dark silhouette against the night sky. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. Just driving. The radio was still off. The silence was broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional passing car. My knee had stopped bouncing. It was just a dull ache now. A reminder of the day's events. I thought about the appraiser. Her flat voice. Her narrowed eyes. There seems to be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I liked that. It was so much cleaner than you've been played. I passed a gas station. The same one where I'd bought the burrito. I resisted the urge to stop. I wasn't that desperate. Not yet. I kept driving. The road stretched out before me, an endless ribbon of asphalt. And the darkness was all-encompassing. But it didn't feel as threatening as it had before. It felt neutral. Like a blank slate. I thought about the potted fern. Still on the porch. Probably dead by now. A casualty of war. It had been a silent witness to my struggles. A little green tragedy. I found myself humming a tune. A childhood song about a lost balloon. It was a silly song, but it made me feel something. Something other than the dull throb of anxiety. A flicker of something almost like hope. I decided to head towards the coast. I hadn't been to the ocean in years. The sound of the waves, the salty air. It felt off place to go. A place to breathe. I drove through the night. The landscape changed gradually, the city giving way. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of pine. I stopped for gas. The attendant was a man with sleepy eyes. He barely looked at me. I bought a bottle of water. It was there and refreshing. I splashed some on my face. I got back in the car. The sun was starting to rise. A pale sliver of orange on the horizon. It was a new day. Or at least, it was a new morning. The house was far behind me now. And for the first time all day, the key in my pocket felt less like a burden and more like a promise. A promise that I could, indeed, do this alone. Even if it meant finding a few more hidden keys along the way. The thought of his smug face, of his certainty that I would fail, fueled a quiet determination. He wanted me to be dependent. To be the accessory. Well, he was wrong. I was the main event. And I was just getting started. The drive was still long, but the destination felt clearer now. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about the road ahead. And all the little detours I might take. I might even stop and see that ball of twine. Why not? It was a purposeless scene, I knew, but sometimes, those were the best kind. And that is what happened.